Good evening and welcome to the club's 11th and final virtual event prior to the reopening of the club on Wednesday, the 2nd of September. I'd like to introduce Laura King of King Fine Foods. Laura previously had very kindly presented caviar at a caviar evening on number 27 in 2018. So some of you may have already met her. Kings have been supplying the club for over 15 years. Laura is one of the UK's leading caviar experts and the first caviar importer to introduce DNA testing. Working in the luxury food business for over 30 years, she's a self-confessed foodie. Her passion and drive takes her to the four corners of the globe to source the world's finest foods, including farmed caviar, wild smoked salmon, foie gras, chocolate, and infused oils. King's Fine Foods was set up in 2003, and she represents outstanding companies and supplies some of the finest food halls, restaurants, hotels, and airlines. To name a few, the Ritz, Fortnum Masons, and Harrods. If you haven't already ordered caviar from Laura for this evening, we very much hope that you will have a glass of champagne or vodka with a chunk of white chocolate handy for tonight's presentation. At the bottom of your screen, you will find a question and answer button, which, and I very much hope that you'll be able to ask, well, I ask you to ask lots of questions this evening of Laura. Laura, it's lovely to see you, and over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. I must confess, this is the first time I've actually done a Zoom virtual caviar tasting, so I'm slightly nervous and also quite worried that I'm either going to forget something or spill something or do something I shouldn't do with the caviar. So, but any questions, do ask. So, caviar is the roe of the female sturgeon, and there are 29 different types of sturgeon, but primarily now with farming, there are about 11 sturgeon that are consumed on a fairly regular basis. And tonight we're trying 6 of those caviars. So caviar is now all farmed. The last time there was wild caviar was in 2008. And then CITES brought in CITES 2 on sturgeon. So it means that it is protected. And if you import or export sturgeon, you have to have a license. And actually that's a very interesting point because as we all know, it's been pretty tough the last 4 or 5 months, very difficult for us as a business. We were at the beginning of lockdown, I had 250 kilos of caviar, and that's quite a lot of caviar, with nowhere to sell it. So we slashed prices and we sold privately, actually. And I was telling actually one of your members who came to collect some caviar today, we did have to throw away some Beluga, which is very upsetting. But we did manage to sell quite a lot of caviar. And in fact, now I'm buying caviar again. But the problem now is that it is quite difficult to buy. Because of lockdown, lots of the farms realised that their customers had completely disappeared, particularly cruise liners and airlines who take quite a lot of caviar. So they stopped all farming. And of course, fish will only produce a sort of minimum of once a year. So you can't, it's not something that can be delivered on tap. So that's created lots of other problems that I'll talk about as we go through the tasting. So sturgeon is all farmed now. No longer any wild sturgeon apart from some paddlefish in the Tennessee lakes, which is not terribly good quality. So it's all farmed, and I buy caviar all over the world. My preferred, or one of my preferred suppliers is in Belgium, and we're tasting 2 caviars from Belgium tonight. I buy in France, I buy in Germany, and I buy quite a lot of caviar from China. I didn't want to buy Chinese caviar, but I couldn't ignore it really because it is very good. When the Michelin star restaurants are open in Paris, and I think some of them are back now, out of 28 Michelin starred chefs, 23 would buy Chinese caviar because it's consistent, it's very good quality. I've been to the farm in Thousand Island Lakes, and they do a very good job. So I initially reluctantly decided to buy Chinese caviar, and now buy quite a lot of it. We're the largest importer of caviar into the UK, and we sell about 1.8 tons of caviar, which includes previously selling to Cathay Pacific, who are clearly presently not buying any caviar. So caviar is all farmed. The reason caviar is expensive, particularly Beluga, is that you have to wait for the caviar to produce the eggs. It's not a quick process. So Beluga farmed, if it were wild, it would take 18 years to produce the eggs. Farmed, it will take 12 years. Every other type of caviar, so everything from the quickest sturgeon to produce the eggs would be 6 years, and all the other caviars are between 8 and 10 years. So the fact that you've got to wait a long time, that's why caviar is expensive, and for that reason only, and particularly with Beluga. Beluga is also quite difficult to farm, and as is Sevruga, actually. Sevruga is incredibly difficult to farm. There's only one farm really that was producing Sevruga, and they were based in Germany. But they're quite difficult to buy from. They're quite new to me, and I managed to buy some Sevruga, but it was becoming quite a problem, and I needed Sevruga. So the Belgium farm, I explained it to the couple that run that farm, and he has many contacts. He's a biochemist, he's very well connected, and he said, Laura, I think I can get you some sturgeon, some Sevruga. He got me Sevruga, and he started to produce. He got the sturgeon, the Stellatus sturgeon, and started to produce Sevruga. So now I have a new source, and he has a new product. So that's when it works really well. When that happens, I think that's great. So we're going to. I'm sitting here. I must tell you, because I can't see any of you. It is very odd not being able to see any of you. Very strange. So all I can see is me, which is pretty scary. And I can sort of vaguely see Andrew in the corner, which is quite nice. Thank God you're there, Andrew, because otherwise this would be the weirdest experience.
Don't worry.
It's all farmed. I buy all over the world. Farming, really what farming has done is it has speeded up the process. So in terms of wild caviar, you would wait 18 years for Beluga. So now that it's all farmed, it's a much quicker process. Farmed caviar is good, but it doesn't have the same taste as wild. And I think it's like wild and like wild salmon. It is, the taste profile is different. And I think it's more similar, actually. And I have to confess, I probably wasn't going to tell you this, but I did tell Andrew earlier, and it was quite funny, so I'll tell you. We've recently redone our tasting notes, and I did them with John, the chef at the Ritz, who very kindly sort of helped me out. And I had a look at some of the notes just prior to us doing the tasting. And I thought, well, I better have a check. And I have to confess that there are a couple of things. Vegetal, I wasn't quite sure. I think he was talking about the embryo or relating to plants, and I haven't been able to ask him, but that was one of the words he'd used. And also a word which I couldn't even pronounce, which is waikami, which is an edible seaweed. So he'd used that as well. So we're going to talk about that later, but we've got some sort of interesting tasting notes, which I think you've been sent. So we're going to start with Beluga. And the reason we start with Beluga, as I said, is the most expensive, but we're starting with it because in terms of taste, it's very subtle. It tastes hints of the sea, walnut, very creamy. So if you can see, you've probably all, if you've ordered the caviar, some of you will have ordered a 10 gram tin, possibly larger. Now today, in terms of Beluga, I buy Belgian Beluga and I buy Chinese Beluga. Because Beluga is in short supply, the Belgians, now the only Beluga that I have from them for the next month is in a 50 gram plus size tin. So I think you're all tasting Chinese, and in fact I am tasting Chinese Beluga. That's because I'm fairly sure if you're tasting, that's exactly what you're going to be tasting. And this is how it should look. So I don't know how the light is really, but can you see that, Andrew? Is it sort of, not really? Oh, no.
Clearly.
Can you see it? Not very clearly?
No, that's fine.
Okay, cool. So it's the largest egg. So Beluga is always the largest of all the eggs. And if you wanted to open up all of your caviars, in fact, we should do that. Let's do that. I've been told not to move the computer because I'm going to go out of sound possibly. But so what we're going to do, if you get the Beluga, and then if you're tasting with me, next will come the Osietra. So that's the Osietra, if you can see that. Next, we're going to taste the golden Osietra. So that would be a lot more golden, if you can see, in terms of colour. And then we're going to move on to the platinum. Which is there. And then we go, oh, I've almost forgotten actually. Then we're going to move on. I opened this earlier only because I had a feeling I'm doing this tasting at home, and I had a feeling that on a glass table I would probably break the table, but I'm going to try and show you this. So this is how we buy most of the caviar, and this is a 1.8 kilo tin. And we buy it in this size and then we decant it. So in anything from a 10 gram, and some of you will have purchased a 10 gram, up to 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, 125 gram. So I buy it in this format and then we decant it. So
how much is that, Laura? How much?
So this, if you were buying this a 1.8 kilo in Harrods now, that would be, I'm guessing they'd probably sell that for about 3,000 possibly. They would sell that tin. Do you know, I'm talking to you thinking, oh gosh, I forgot to tell you some things, looking at the Beluga sturgeon behind me. So when we've done the tasting, I will, well, in fact, I'm going to do it now because I might forget. So sorry to be a bit disjointed. But just in terms of the size, I don't know, Andrew, can you see that? Can you sort of...
It seems as one or two might be having a problem opening the tins. Are you able to give some guidance?
Yes, of course. So the best thing to do is to get a knife, okay? And literally just, so if you see the tin here, just pop it underneath and up. If not, something like a 50p piece would do it, but I always use a knife. So once you've got it, it's vacuumed, so you just twist it, just twist the knife. Or
looks simple, but it's just a knack, really.
It's a knack. If not, you could do it with the top of the scissors, but just watch your hands because I've almost had an accident before doing that. So if you can just see the Beluga here, can you see that, Andrew? Can you see?
Yes, very clearly. Yeah.
So that. One of the things about the Beluga, and I said that it's the most expensive because you've got to wait 12 years, they're 4 meters long and a ton in weight. So this is a sort of 33% of his actual size. So they're huge. So I just wanted to tell you about that. And also they're very prehistoric. They date back to the Triassic period. So other than the shark, oldest fish known to man. So they've been around for a long time, and they're very docile. When you see them in the wild, or, you know, when I've been in Iran or Russia or in any of the farms now, they don't move particularly quickly. They're quite docile.
And they grow how many years before they start producing, you said?
But this beluga farmed, if it were in the wild, it would be 18 years. And if it were farmed, it would be 12 years. So that's why it's expensive. And in fact, someone said to me the other day, there are lots of problems now with regard to leaving Europe. If you happen to be a caviar dealer, and I know there aren't many of us, but you have to wait. For me to import caviar outside of Europe, I have to apply for a CITES license. So the farm will apply for the CITES license in their country. CITES is the body which protects endangered species. I will apply to the UK office. Anywhere in the world, if you apply for a CITES license, it will take you 1 week. The UK, it takes 3 weeks. And in fact, now they've just put out a notice saying it's taking 4 to 5 weeks. So if you allow for the week of importing, of getting the import license from the country you've purchased the caviar, and then the shipping, it's going to take 8 weeks to import any caviar.
So you need a new license for every time you buy?
Every time. And the license must be specific to the size of what you're bringing in and the species. So you can't swap species. So it could be an Osietra, which is a golden stardy species, or a Beluga, which is Huso species. And it must be the weight and size. So it's going to be logistically a nightmare, and it means that all caviar dealers will have to have a lot more stock. Whereas now, of course, I can buy from Europe in 48 hours. So that's going to create another problem for us, really. So we are, in terms of tasting, can you ask, I don't know if you'll get any response, but is everyone all right opening their tin?
Hope so. I think you showed that pretty well.
Okay, cool. So we're going to taste platinum, then we're going to taste the large imperial, and then we're going to finish with Savruga. So in terms of tasting, we always start with Beluga. And the reason we do that is that it's very subtle. It's very subtle, it's very soft. These are just some little tasting tins that I'm going to taste from now, actually, but very soft, subtle, very soft, walnuts, hints of the sea. When we taste it, actually, I'm probably just going to use this knife, but I'll do it properly. So we use mother of pearl or horn. And the reason we do that is that if we used silver or gold plate, in theory, if you left it in the tin, it would oxidize. So, and also, of course, it's very beautiful and it fits the sort of caviar experience. So
and you can buy those anywhere, can you, Laura?
Well, probably not anywhere. Of course, you could buy them from us, or you could probably get them in Harrods or Fortnum's. I don't think they're readily available. We had someone the other day who wanted to buy a big dish. So a sort of this sort of thing, if I can see, like a big mother of pearl dish. It's got all spoons in it, but and I'm not sure they're very readily available. I buy them in the Philippines, actually, but they're great for tasting caviar. So when we taste, you take your spoon, and we always taste it on the back of our hand, and we do that so nothing impairs the taste. You just get the taste of the caviar, and it's a great. I think it's a great way to taste caviar. You want to do something that's sort of exotic and, you know, fits the profile of what it is really. So I suggest that you all take a little of the caviar. If you can see, I already spilled some, and you just put it just in between the sort of forefinger and thumb. So just there. Can you all see where I put it? And let it sort of breathe, and then just literally lick it off your hand. It should be soft, walnutty, very creamy, very subtle.
So Laura, tell me, blini, are they, I mean, a lot of people eat caviar with blini.
Yeah, no, I think a blini is fine. I think a blini works well. Chopped egg, chives, lemon juice were devised by the Americans to take away the taste of very poor quality caviar. I think egg actually goes very well. Softly boiled egg for breakfast is really delicious. A jacket potato, new potato would be lovely. But if you put lemon juice on this, or if you put onion with it, which a lot of people would have, I think it would sort of completely destroy it. You know, you need that. It's so subtle, and I hope you're all feeling that it's very subtle and delicious and sort of lovely. So that's Beluga. And people, it's the most expensive because it takes a long time to produce the eggs. Is it the best? Actually, that is absolutely delicious. I think caviar is a bit like lots of things in life, you know, like being on a flight or anything. Well, I can't remember what being on a flight was like, but many things. It depends on how you're feeling that day and the service you get and many other things. But because it's the most expensive, people often would think perhaps it was the best. So next we're going to move on to Osietra. So we've done Beluga, which is Huso, most expensive of the caviars. And now we're going to move on to Osietra. Osietra has it should have a lovely tobacco sheen. And we are again going to taste this on the back of our hands.
Hopefully you've got vodka and or champagne standing by.
Yeah, I haven't got any of that here actually, but I forgot that. Have you got any, Andrew? I sent some in. Have you got it?
No, that's too risky. I'm riding my bicycle home afterwards.
Oh, right. Did you get the caviar though? Have you got any caviar?
Thank you. Yes, we did, yeah.
So anyway, this, in terms of taste, it's particularly, actually it's very subtle as well, but quite buttery, more sort of a buttery taste on the palate. Very soft and very subtle as well, really. So again, Osietra, Golden Stardy, Osietra when they produce the eggs, 8 years of age when they produce the eggs. One of the things about the caviar, it will be difficult. If you've purchased 10 grams of caviar, it's a great way to taste caviar, but it's a lot of tin. And sometimes it is difficult because you just see quite an expanse of tin. So I hope that, you know, if anyone has 10 gram, that it's okay and it's sort of tasting. I mean, it will taste beautifully, but it's just the way that we present the tin. We still have quite a large tin. So next,
would you have cream with this? Would you have cream with caviar?
No, not really. I personally wouldn't. Some people might put creme fraiche with it. Perhaps with a sort of a new potato, you know, jacket potato, that would be nice. But it wouldn't be something I would reach for. I'd reach for egg more than I would reach for cream, really. But I mean, it's, you know, entirely up to what people like, really. So next we're going to have the golden and the Shah's golden caviar, and this is Chinese. The Chinese are the only people in the world to produce the golden caviar, and at the moment I can't buy it because they haven't got any.
Is it expensive?
It's quite expensive. If you buy the very, very, very light, it's incredibly expensive. And in fact, we're just launching it with Harrods under a very special range that we're doing with them. but I can't buy very much of it. In fact, now I can't buy any, so I won't be able to buy any for the next 2 or 3 months. But the Chinese are the only people to produce this very golden caviar, and I think people like it because it's golden. It looks great. Chefs like it because it looks wonderful on a dish.
And it's different.
It's different, yeah. And I think if you see all of them, if you've got them all set out, you know, that is remarkably, you know, that's very light in terms of the colour. So, in terms of the taste, so again, we do the same thing. And you'll notice it's very light. So you can see. And in terms of the taste, delicious again, still very subtle, a little bit of mineral. That actually is very subtle. It's very subtle, it's very soft. In terms of caviar, would it be my favourite? I love the look of it, but I think that there are others that for me would perhaps be a little better, but the look's great.
Laura, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have the perception that farming the eggs from the sturgeon kills the fish. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Or?
Completely correct. Yes. So
Yeah.
it is very difficult to, if you don't kill the sturgeon. There is a process. There's a Swiss process that they've tried to use in Yorkshire as well, where they inject the sturgeon. And they inject it with hormones to get it to release the eggs. Hormones in the food chain is illegal anyway. And then they have some sort of secret, I was going to say substance, but secret whatever, which coats the eggs. Because if you imagine, if you have a sturgeon and it releases its eggs in the wild, the eggs will be sticky. So they will fall to the bottom of the seabed. We don't want that stickiness with the eggs. So once you've got it to release the eggs, then you're still going to have that problem with sticky caviar, sticky eggs. So you have to coat it in something. So the process it tastes of nothing. It's not a good process. We tried. The theory is good, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all for now. So it's not successful.
So what happens to the actual meat afterwards?
So every part of the meat is used. Some places like Restaurant Story, which has just recently opened, which is a Michelin-star restaurant, they buy the sturgeon fillets. Every part, right down to the backbone of the sturgeon, the visiga, which is Scoffier used in Kubliak, is used. The bladder of the sturgeon, the finings, is used in beer. So all the meat is used and sold. I sell a little bit here. As I said, I sell it to Restaurant Story. I have sold it to airlines. It's quite dense. It's quite a dense meat. If you have it in Iran, they would put it with many different flavors. It tends to take on the taste of anything, really. So it's a dense fish.
Like tuna, sort of, it's meaty.
Yes, meaty. It is like tuna, perhaps not as tasty as tuna, though, I think. But it is meaty, dense. Smoked. You can smoke sturgeon.
Do you sell it?
We do have it. Yeah, I really buy it to order because it is. It's a very particular fish. So if someone wanted it, we can bring it in. And we can bring it in. So we're next going to move on to the platinum caviar. So platinum is a hybrid, and there are now more hybrids. So that means crossing two sturgeon. And I didn't particularly want to buy any hybrid sturgeon. I felt that it was better to stick with the pure and not cross the sturgeon. But in fact, in Belgium, they've created a hybrid of an Osietra, a golden stardy, and which is a golden stardy, Osietra, and a Barry sturgeon. And they've produced a fantastic caviar. This is it. And this probably in London, in terms of the Michelin star chefs, because the price point is good, this is one of the caviars that they all love. And it's become really popular. We've been selling it probably for about 4 years, but it's a really popular caviar. So, in terms of taste, it's very well rounded. I think of all the caviars we've tasted now, I think you're going to notice that it has a slightly more intense flavour, sort of green almonds, the sea. It will last longer on the palate, and that's one of the things about Belgian caviar. I think the Chinese looks fabulous, but the Belgian caviar, in terms of lingering on the palate, every time it does that. It's the most expensive in terms of, if you compare one Osietra to another, so an Osietra from Germany with an Osietra from Belgium. Belgium only has one farm, but they produce fantastic caviar. So I think you're going to be finding that it has, well, Jonathan Ritz said it had undertones of black trumpet mushrooms. But I have to confess, when I read that today, I thought, God, I don't know what a black trumpet mushroom tastes like. So it's slightly ridiculous I'm telling you that, but that's exactly what he said. But it's a lovely caviar, and I'm sorry you're not all there and we can't be talking about this, because it is, I think you'd all be really enjoying it.
Well, maybe we can do another dinner.
We'll do another, exactly, we'll do another dinner, absolutely. So next we're going to taste this large tin, and this is, I'm just trying to open it and then so you can see.
Now, once you've opened a tin and the air gets to it,
Yeah.
I mean, a big tin like that will last longer than a small tin.
Yes, it would last longer, but if I left this here overnight, then tomorrow that wouldn't be good. It would have oxidized. And what will happen with this caviar, if you notice, this caviar, all of you who are tasting, has virtually no smell. So caviar has no smell. You don't, no fishy smell. This would absolutely become very pungent, very strong, and it has none of that. So this is 1.8 kilo, and it's Imperial Caviar, and let me just take that. So again, we taste it just in the middle.
Tell us what Imperial means.
It doesn't really mean anything, actually. It's a name that we sort of created, and now. So this is a Shrankidaricus sturgeon. So it's a hybrid Shrankidaricus, and we call it Imperial. And in fact, now pretty much if you buy it, it would be sold to you as Imperial. But it isn't like a Savruga or an Osietra or a Beluga that have always been called that name, because this is a relatively new sturgeon. So Shrankidaricus or Imperial has only been on the market for probably the last 5 years. And this is a firm egg. I think you'll notice that when you taste it. It's a firm egg. The one that I have here is slightly golden. It's very interesting. We did a tasting recently in a Michelin star restaurant, well, before lockdown, in a Michelin star restaurant. And the chef doesn't like Chinese caviar. And he tasted this and he said, Laura, it's very balanced and it's a good caviar. It's a very good caviar. So I think it works well with for chefs, and it's a really good price. So in terms of sort of value for money, this is definitely one of the cheaper caviars. And I think, you know, people as well, you know, if something is a better price, that's always a great thing.
Laura, would you just describe caviar a bit like wine, that if you open a little bit in advance, it changes flavour when it's opened and diced a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And also the other thing about caviar, I guess the same as wine. When I used to work for W.G. White's, which was one of the oldest caviar companies in the world. And the guy, my boss used to say to me, well, caviar is always a bit better when it's about 6 months old. When it's matured it was mostly tins then. Now it's either a tin or it's these sort of plastic tubs. And I would say if caviar is very fresh, so sometimes I buy caviar from Belgium and it's maybe 3 weeks old. And it is then very fresh. So I think caviar improves with age. But the shelf life on caviar, when I buy it, this caviar has a shelf life of a year. If you keep it at -2 to -4, so it's not freezing, but it's cold. We put a 4-month shelf life on it, unless we buy it pre-packed. And then if we buy it pre-packed, and we only do that with Belgian caviar, we follow the farm and they would put an 8-month shelf life on it. But I would say, yes, it does improve with age, like wine. Well, I don't know, not all wine improves.
But also opening it in advance as well gives it a little bit oxidation.
Yeah, I wouldn't open it too far in advance. I think caviar needs to be cold. And I think if I do a tasting and the tasting lasts for 3 hours, I think at the end of it generally, I would have preferred it when it was opened, if it had been open for something like 3 hours. So I think as a generalization, it's best if it's fairly cold.
Can you tell us if there are any British caviars?
So there is a farm in I think in Devon. I don't think there are. Well, I know through someone who had been to audit it. They have very few. I believe they have very few sturgeon. And I think possibly the sturgeon come in from Poland and then are held here and then are sold as British caviar, which is not illegal actually.
So what's the secret then to being able to have the right conditions for farming?
You could farm here. I think the thing about farming, it's very costly to have a sturgeon farm. You need thousands and thousands of sturgeon. You need a lot of space. Preferably, as they do in Belgium, it's undercover. So, you know, the size of, if anyone's been to T5, which I think is half a mile long, isn't it? So the size of the sturgeon farm in Belgium, it's about half that size.
A big investment then.
Huge.
And do you need to, ethically, do you need to produce evidence that you are producing ethically? And
yeah, everyone is absolutely audited. Having said that, in 2008, when CITES banned all wild caviar, I bought some fantastic Beluga from Bulgaria. And I was with a guy called Alan Jones, who's one of the leading, he's retired now, but was one of the leading experts on sturgeon. And he came to the office and we sat down and tasted this Beluga. And it was 100% wild. There was no wild, but it was definitely wild. It couldn't be farmed because you have to wait 12 years. So it was impossible. But what they did in Bulgaria is they caught the sturgeon, kept them in pens for a year, and then they called it farmed. So if you're a caviar dealer, you're sort of wise not to buy Bulgarian caviar. So I don't know if
wild has to be wild full time.
Wild's got to be wild, and it's illegal. So there is no wild. Yeah. It's illegal. So, and everything is through CITES is really clearly monitored and audited. And that's why we purchased some caviar about 4 or 5 years, longer than that, maybe 6, 7 years ago, from Italy. And it was, in fact, we got some very bad press because we'd bought something as Savruga. It tasted actually delicious, and it wasn't Savruga. It was a Ruthinus caviar, which I'd never even actually heard of. As a result of that, we'd already started to DNA our caviar. I think we're one of the few that does that, but we DNA just to make sure that what it says on the tin it actually is. And it's just a safeguard for us, because while I think I know everything about caviar, I certainly couldn't tell the Ruthinus from the Savruga when I saw that, several years ago.
And tell me, do the Koreans have any?
That's a very good question. Do the Koreans have it? I think there is a farm there. I haven't tasted it. I've tasted caviar from many parts of the world. But if anyone knows of any in Korea, that would be interesting. Yeah, I've not tasted any from Korea. And it's certainly the last caviar, the newest farm on the block, for want of a better word, was Madagascar, which sounds very romantic. So I was very keen to sort of, bring it in and taste it because I thought it sounded lovely. It's okay. It's just okay. It's not great caviar, really. But I'm not aware of Korea. So if anyone knows about that, I'd love to find out more.
So there's no chance of wild sturgeon getting crossed over, and there are none wild in the UK.
No wild. So lastly, we're going to taste Savruga. And this is Belgium. And most caviar, it's by far the smallest egg. And if you've opened the tin, you'll notice that it's a very small egg. Can you just see? Much, much smaller than all the others. Historically in the wild, exactly the same. It's stellatus. It's probably the toughest to farm, and now the Belgians are making it for me, but prior to that you could only buy it in Germany. And it is delicate. It's a delicate sturgeon. It has a very, in terms of taste, so the first thing that you will notice is the salt. It has a lot of salt. And I think it is very vibrant in terms of the taste. And we finish with it for that reason, really. We try to go very mild, finishing with something that in terms of taste is more vibrant. It resembles more than anything else the wild caviar, and it lingers on the palate. I think if you're tasting it, you'll still be able to taste the salt. Jonathan Ritz said it tasted like the edible seaweed wakame, which I probably completely mispronounced. And it definitely has that taste of the sea because of the salt. Most caviar dealers, if you ask them their favorite caviar, they will tell you Savruga. and I really like Sevruga. I think Sevruga probably then followed by the Platinum would be my favourite. If you happen to have, and I'm sorry because we should have, this is completely my fault, we should have mentioned this earlier, but we've got some out-of-date white chocolate here. This is something that Heston at the Fat Duck did. He created a recipe. Someone copied him, so he took it off the menu straight away, which is quite funny. But we always finish a tasting with some chocolate, white chocolate. So
you finish at the end with it.
the end, yeah. So you just have the white chocolate, and we always do it with Sevruga. So you've got that salt, which sort of cuts through.
With your vodka.
I haven't got that yet.
What vodka would you recommend?
Well, I have to recommend Beluga.
Okay, right, quite.
Yeah. And champagne, I would. We used to sort of drink it quite a lot with Joseph Perrier, or now we use Ayala or Bollinger as our sort of champagnes that we sell. But I think vodka's good, but it can be quite strong in terms of having been in Russia and drunk far too much vodka. When I took British Airways to fishing for sturgeon, I haven't drunk it since. So that
I can't blame you. I can't blame you. Tell me, is the Russian caviar coming in at all?
So there is Russian caviar, and Russian caviar at the moment I wouldn't buy. It's just simply not good enough. I wouldn't particularly buy Iranian. I'd love to buy Iranian, particularly Iranian Beluga, and Harrods would love me to buy Iranian Beluga. But the problem is in Iran that they take the egg too quickly. So they're not waiting the 12 years. The egg's too small. So it's sort of really difficult to sell it as Beluga. I mean, it is Beluga, but it's such a small egg. So while Iranian caviar has that story, and when there was wild caviar, the difference between Iranian and Russian is that Russian would blend. So they they caught so many more sturgeon than the Iranians. They would take 20 fish and then blend and put them in this 1.8 kilo tin that we've got here. What they did in Iran was one fish, one tin. So even if you had 30 grams left, it would stay in, it would go in the tin. It wouldn't be mixed.
Tell me, does Iran still have indigenous sturgeon? Is there any indigenous sturgeon anywhere?
There are a couple, and I'm going to forget the names of them, that are indigenous to the Caspian Sea, really.
Yeah.
But it's not sturgeon that is consumed, and if I thought about it, I should know their names, but I can't remember. But it's not caviar that is sold as, as a well-known species.
Well, thank you, Laura. That is really exciting.
I'm so sorry I can't see you all. And I'm sorry, Andrew, you didn't get your caviar because you were sitting there without any caviar, which is very upsetting.
It would have been too difficult with everything going on at the moment. But I hope everybody enjoyed it, and thank you. It's been really interesting.
And I hope to see you all and to be able to do this in person at some stage.
Well, let's hope we can do another dinner. But I would like to thank you on behalf of the club and everybody that attended tonight. Very exciting, and thank you. We've all learned a huge amount. But I also had to thank Holly, your daughter, who I know who's sort of behind the scenes there, been helping out, and she should take a bow anyway.
Shall I grab her quickly? Have you got 1 minute? Let me get her.
Yes, go on.
She actually, I have to tell you, so Holly pretty much, she works with me, and she pretty much runs the business actually, because she tells me what to do. I pack caviar, she is in charge. So I'm going to get her. I'll get her.
Thank you. While Laura's gone to find Holly, I'd just like to thank Guy Hodgson for his masterly organisation and hosting of these virtual events. and we've had so many complimentary emails and messages. There's Holly.
So this is
Hello.
Holly.
Hi, good evening. Good evening.
Hi, Holly.
And Holly is, well, very much the future and very much in charge
The boss.
quite a lot. She's the boss. Yeah, can I tell you that she definitely is the boss? And the great thing about Holly is she's a great businesswoman. She's tougher than me, and she doesn't take any nonsense, and she definitely tells her mother what to do. Is that true?
Well, she sounds like a chip off the block, quite. So, but thank you both very much. Thank you, Holly. And we've all loved it. And it's been a wonderful experience going through all the caviars with you. And wow, you know, perhaps we'll be ordering some more through you.
Thank you so much.
Bigger tins, preferably.
Yeah.
Those really
If
impressive.
anyone orders, get them to make sure they tell me, and I'll send them a spoon and, you know, other things. So just let me know.
Good. Well, thank you again. And I was just going to say, Holly, I was thanking Guy, who's been instrumental in putting all this virtual program together that we've run during the club closure. And sadly, this is the final one before we reopen next Wednesday. But you know, there is a team, an opening team, or reopening team, I should say, who've been busy getting the club ready and making it safe for members to come in and use. So we hope that those members who are still with us will be raring to get back into the club and use it. We open next week with lunch in the coffee room, and then the following week we open with dinner as well. Chambers are open, and obviously the morning room with the bar is open, and we'll be looking at the opening number 27 later on in the month. But thank you again. It's been wonderful to see you both, and
See you soon.
See you soon.
see you soon.
Thank you
Okay,
so much.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.